In today's video, I am going to be breaking down the differences between a man-to-man defense and a zone defense, and obviously when you would want to play either or. So let's get down and let's really check this out. What is a zone defense? Well, first I'm going to show you a 2-3 zone and really what it is. In a zone defense, you're going to be defending an area of the court instead of an individual man. So that is a massive difference than man-to-man defense. In man-to-man defense, instead of guarding an area, you're going to be guarding an individual player on the court, which means that instead of guarding where you're standing, you're going to be following around that player, whether he's going through different screens or just in general running around the court. However, there is a massive downfall to a zone, and that is when you attack the different double team areas in a zone, which is those overlapping areas between the zones. If you can attack those spots, then you can then collapse the defense, in which case that opens up a lot of three-point shots. This is actually why we are seeing so many youth teams running a zone defense, because basically, who at the age of 7 or 8 or even 10 years old can shoot threes consistently? They can't, which is why so many young teams are running a zone defense, and I'm going to say right now, they should actually be teaching man-to-man defense first, and there is a very good reason for that. Because what I've seen when it comes to younger teams running a zone defense is because they've been told to defend an area that is basically having imaginary lines, they don't necessarily understand the concept of the zone defense, which means that if we had a player on the offensive side who was a very aggressive player who wanted to get to that rim, a lot of times they will be able to dribble past the first initial players in that zone, whether it be the top 2 players, the wing 2 players, or the opposite wing 2 players, whatever it is, they will be able to attack those gaps and then, of course, draw up player 5. And when that happens, usually what you will see is, especially at younger age groups, the whole defense will collapse, and of course, if we have smart enough players, they will be able to cut what's called cutting back door, which then allows, again, an easy layup if you had an aggressive player. However, if you're playing up against a team that does not have an aggressive player, this could be one heck of a killer defense to run. And it's really not teaching anything, because a lot of the coaches are not teaching the zone correctly on how to make your movements, and of course the different secondary zones, and of course player movement, where if you're drawn out of a zone, then of course another player has to fill in. There are so many different things to teach in a zone that it's just like man-to-man. There's like 100 different options for every single position depending on where that ball is on the court. However, we're just not teaching it correctly, and that's why I think that we should really teach man-to-man defense over a zone first, so that they get the rotations down in a man-to-man, and because that will just automatically help in a zone. I'm going to give you an example right now with a man-to-man defense. Of course, this could technically, to an untrained eye, look like a 3-2 zone, but we are running a 5-out offense, and usually you will have ball on. You're going to have these players here one big step away, which means that they are 1 pass away, and then because player 5 and 4 are 2 passes away, you would have player 5 red, the defense, to be 1 step and 2 steps away, which is generally on the block. Let's say, as an example, we have player 2 get that ball. We would then have player 5 move in to be 1 pass away. This will be, again, ball on, 1 step away. Player 3 will be 2 steps away, and generally that will be around the elbow. And player 4, because he's 3 passes away, there's 2 different ways that you could play this, and it actually depends on the coach, to be honest with you. Now, in theory, that player should be pretty well in line with the rim with most coaches, and that's generally how you would want to run a man. However, depending on so many different options that are available when it comes to what player has the ball on offense, you could play this even more safe and not have him in front of the rim. So technically speaking, player 4 should be roughly right there, so that if player 2 was to drive, player 4 would be able to step out very easily and take that charge. When this happens, player 3 needs to then step down so that he's technically defending 2 players, and then we would have player 1 step down to protect the high post. This is how you would rotate in a man-to-man defense. In fact, if there was a kick-out pass that made it to player 4, technically speaking, we would need to rotate player 3 to there, player 1 would go here one big step away, and then we would have player 4 move up to defend player 1, and then player 2 would still be with his man. Player 5 would obviously be then, of course, in the key because, of course, of help side defense. However, that's how essentially the rotations would go. Now, if you were in, let's say, a zone defense and a player got pulled out of their zone, whether by a mistake or just because he wanted to follow a player because maybe that player was maybe in a position to be able to score outside of the zone and there wasn't anyone who was going to be able to cover that area, then you would still need to rotate that zone, very similar to what we just seen right here. So this is why I always prefer to teach a man-to-man defense first, because if there's players who are caught outside of a zone, you're going to need to rotate those players around. They're going to need to cycle around, and because of that, with a man-to-man, they learn that anyways, and at that point, you don't have to worry about any missed coverages or any missed zones for open shots to happen. I hope that this video's kind of made sense as to why I would always prefer to teach a man-to-man defense first. However, both a man-to-man and zone defense are great options because they do allow, or at least force, the other team to essentially react to it. I'm going to give you another example as to why you would run a zone over a man, and that is, I'm going to give you a very good example. When my team was playing up against my juniors, a grade 9-10 varsity team, I coach both junior and senior varsity, and my junior varsity was playing up against the best school in the city. Now, this school usually blows us out by about 50 to 60 points. It's my first year coaching with this school, but generally speaking, in history, the school gets blown out badly by this number 1 school. And when we played against them, I have a couple of strategies up my sleeves, and of course I've got some really good players this year, and we were able to really stick with that team for a very long time. We still lost by 30, but that's the best result that the school's ever had against that number 1 school. And because of that, what we did was I was able to see that their center was not able to guard neither of my big men. And I start 2 big guys in my starting lineup, both of which can dunk a basketball, and one's a grade 9, one's a grade 10, and both of which are well over 6 feet tall. And because of this, neither of my big men could be guarded by their center. Their center was definitely a football center, and he was about 260, 270 pounds at 6'4", 6'5". He was a big dude, but he could not guard because of his speed. We got a little bit of a lead earlier on in that game, and that forced that school to switch into a zone defense. In fact, they switched into a 2-3 zone because they wanted to hide that slower center in the middle because, of course, I have 2 guys who are super athletic, who are definitely basketball players, who were basically dancing circles around their center. So that is another reason why you would want to run a zone, not just for the defensive strategy to force the other team to switch their offensive game up, but also to hide certain players who may not be the greatest defensive players against what the other team may have. I hope that this video has helped you. If it has, hit that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you guys again next time.